Why a burned-out empath is more dangerous than any narcissist realizes. What if I told you the most powerful person in the room isn't the one making the most noise, but the one silently observing, watching, waiting, pushed too far? The quiet empath. The one you've underestimated. Stay with me, because what Carl Jung discovered about the human psyche will completely shift how you see the empath's role in power dynamics. Carl Jung believed that every person holds both light and shadow, but for empaths, this duality is more pronounced, more volatile. You see, most mistake empathy for weakness, but Jung's research revealed something deeper, something far more dangerous. Here's what most don't understand about the empath, and why they should. According to Jung, the psyche is layered. There's the persona, the public mask. Behind it, the raw self, the inner truth. So, what happens when someone who feels everything begins to unmask, when they've been pushed too far, manipulated too often, and betrayed too deeply? What emerges is not bitterness. It's transformation. Empaths, Jung said, live at the crossroads of contradiction. They feel pain, yet hold space for others. They see deception, yet believe in human goodness. This isn't naivete. It's what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposing truths without collapsing. And this is where it gets dangerous. Jung taught that true wholeness only comes after confronting your shadow. Most avoid it. But empaths, they're dragged into it. Repeated betrayal forces them into accelerated integration. They don't just understand darkness, they've survived it, they've lived it, and they've emerged with something more potent than revenge: clarity. The narcissist sees compassion and assumes control. That's the fatal mistake. What they fail to recognize is that a heart wide open must build a fortress to survive. Empaths don't stay vulnerable forever. They adapt, evolve, harden in the right places. They become something else entirely. Now here's where the tables turn. Jung's theory of individuation states that each person must confront their true self. For most, this takes decades, if it happens at all. But for empaths who've suffered enough, this evolution is fast-tracked. Pain becomes the portal, suffering becomes the spark, and out of that spark rises something unstoppable. Empaths don't just feel emotions, they read them like a language. They log every lie, every betrayal, every manipulation, not as wounds but as data. And when that data reaches critical mass, something awakens. Jung called this the emergence of the self, a force of clarity, power, and self-possession. And once that moment arrives, the narcissist's game ends. Jung described a process called enantiodromia, when something transforms into its opposite after being pushed to the extreme. The generous empath becomes guarded. The forgiving soul becomes resolute. The understanding heart becomes unshakable, not cruel, not cold, but finally whole. And that right there is where the narcissist begins to lose their grip. True strength, Jung said, comes not from dominating others, but from integrating your shadow. The awakened empath doesn't react. They respond. They don't chase. They choose. They don't explain. They decide. They stop playing a game that was rigged from the beginning. Now, listen closely, because here's where everything changes. When an empath reaches what Jung called psychological autonomy, they become immune to manipulation. They no longer react from wounds. They operate from wisdom. They no longer try to rescue those who choose destruction. They withdraw, not from weakness, but from awareness. Detachment becomes power. Empaths begin to recognize patterns instantly. They see through masks. They feel dissonance before a word is spoken. This isn't instability. It's elevated awareness. It's emotional intelligence, sharpened by experience and forged in pain. When this intuitive power fuses with self-trust, it becomes a force beyond reckoning. The awakened empath no longer needs permission to trust themselves. They no longer seek validation from the very people who dismissed them. They no longer chase love where there is none. They choose, deliberately, carefully, and with discernment. And here sups the part that will chill you to your core. Empaths mirror others. That's their gift. But after too much betrayal, something flips. They no longer reflect what others want to see. They begin to reflect truth. They expose the dysfunction, not loudly, not cruelly, but unflinchingly. Jung called this psychological mirroring, and truth, he said, is the one thing deception cannot survive. Then comes the return of the repressed, that moment when all the power the empath once buried resurfaces, not in chaos, but in calm, rooted certainty. They no longer argue, they simply walk away. They no longer try to fix. They choose peace over people-pleasing. They stop participating in relationships that drain them. This isn't spit bitterness, it spits boundaries. Jung believed that the shadow doesn't just house darkness, it hides our unlived potential. For empaths, that means the ability to say no, to walk away, to protect their light. And when they finally reclaim that power, they don't become less kind, they become more intentional. They still care. But now, they choose who gets their care. They love, but they no longer self-abandon for it. They forgive, but they do not forget. They engage, but only where there is mutual respect and integrity. Jung called this state psychological sovereignty. The empath, fully awakened, no longer tries to be everything to everyone. They become someone fully aligned with themselves. They don't rescue those who keep drowning. They no longer pour their energy into people who treat their light like a resource. Instead, they become a lighthouse. And the final transformation. Jung called it the return to the self. The empath stops seeking outside validation. They stop fearing solitude. They become excellent company to themselves. They stop proving. They start embodying. They are now whole. Jung said the most dangerous individuals are not the reactive or the wounded. They're the ones who've turned their pain into wisdom. They've transmuted wounds into strength. They've descended into darkness and emerged with the light. This is not just healing. It is transcendence. The awakened empath doesn't seek revenge. They don't need to. They are proof that even the deepest suffering can give birth to the highest strength. And for the narcissist, that is the most terrifying thing of all. Someone who now loves themselves with the same intensity they once reserved for others. This is the story of the empath's return, not as a victim, but as a sovereign soul, whole, wise, and absolutely unshakable.